Luxury collectors are paying fortunes for gemstones that look damaged, not cracked, not broken, divided. Blue collides with gold. Purple suddenly becomes amber. Some crystals appear sliced into two completely different identities by nature itself. A few now move quietly through private dealer networks before the public ever sees them. Because rarity is no longer enough for elite collectors, the market wants gemstones that create confusion first and understanding later, including one crystal near the end that changes the way wealthy buyers define value entirely. But first, a gemstone so unnatural-looking, many people assume it was created in a laboratory. Don't forget to press and hold that like button, leave a comment, and hit subscribe before we begin. Ranked 10th, Bicolor Fluorite. At first glance, this gemstone does not look natural. The color separation appears too precise, too artificial, almost as if two completely different minerals were fused together inside the same crystal. One side glows with deep electric violet, the other fades into icy green or ocean blue transparency. Under certain lighting, the divide becomes so sharp that many first-time collectors assume the stone has been altered in a laboratory. It has not, and that disbelief is exactly why high-end mineral collectors have started paying close attention to exceptional bicolor fluorite. For decades, fluorite existed mostly in the shadow of traditional luxury gemstones. Diamonds dominated prestige, sapphires represented legacy, emeralds symbolized wealth. Fluorite, despite its extraordinary color zoning, was often viewed as fragile and secondary. But collector psychology has changed. Modern luxury buyers are no longer chasing only perfection. They are chasing visual experiences that feel impossible to replicate. And few natural crystals create that reaction faster than a museum-grade bicolor fluorite. Some specimens appear almost digitally rendered. Sharp rivers of violet cut through transparent green crystal faces with geometric precision. Others contain ghost-like transitions that seem to shift as the stone rotates under light. In elite mineral exhibitions, certain fluorite formations attract crowds faster than stones worth dramatically more per carat. Because rarity alone no longer controls attention, recognition does. The most powerful luxury collectibles are often the ones impossible to confuse with anything else. That shift has quietly benefited unusual bicolor gemstones across the collector market. Large fluorite specimens from regions in China, Switzerland, and southern Africa have become especially desirable when the color separation remains vivid and naturally balanced. Clean zoning is extremely difficult to find in larger crystals, which increases competition among advanced mineral buyers searching for display-grade pieces. And unlike traditional jewelry investments, many elite fluorite collectors are not purchasing these crystals to wear. They are purchasing them to display. Vault lighting, black velvet presentation cases, private mineral rooms, architectural interiors designed around a single specimen. That is where fluorite becomes something very different from ordinary gemstone collecting. It becomes conversation-driven luxury. And in today's high-end collector market, objects that create instant fascination are becoming increasingly valuable, especially when nature creates something that does not quite look real. But compared to the next gemstone on this list, even fluorite begins to look predictable. Ranked 9th, Watermelon Tourmaline. In certain cutting rooms, master gem cutters already know within seconds whether a rough tourmaline crystal is ordinary, or something collectors may fight over. The moment the stone is sliced open, the interior tells the story. A vivid pink core appears first, then a ring of deep green forms around it, like the surface of ripe fruit. No enhancement, no assembly, no artificial fusion, just one crystal growing through dramatic chemical changes deep inside the earth. That extraordinary formation gave rise to one of the most recognizable bicolor gemstones in the luxury world, Watermelon Tourmaline. Unlike many investment stones that depend on prestige branding or historical reputation, Watermelon Tourmaline succeeds because the visual identity is unforgettable. Even people unfamiliar with gemstones instantly recognize that something unusual is happening inside the crystal, and that immediate recognition has become increasingly valuable in modern luxury collecting. Older generations of elite buyers often pursued uniformity, perfect diamonds, even color, traditional hierarchy. But newer high-end collectors are showing a different obsession, distinctiveness. Objects with natural patterns so unique they become impossible to duplicate convincingly. Watermelon tourmaline fits that shift almost perfectly. Some of the finest specimens display razor-clean separation between saturated green exteriors and glowing pink interiors. Others reveal soft transitions that resemble painted watercolor under magnification. In rare crystals, thin white rings appear between the two colors, creating formations that look almost biological rather than geological. That organic appearance is part of the stone's psychological power. Most luxury gemstones feel polished and controlled. Watermelon tourmaline feels alive. Designers in the high jewelry market have quietly leaned into that aesthetic in recent years. Instead of hiding the crystal structure behind traditional cuts, many luxury ateliers now preserve the natural slices themselves, allowing collectors to see the original color zoning exactly as it formed underground millions of years ago. And collectors are responding aggressively to exceptional material. Fine specimens from Brazil and Afghanistan have become especially difficult to source, with vivid saturation, balanced symmetry, and clean transparency all appearing together in the same crystal. Large, untreated examples now move quickly through private dealer networks, especially among buyers searching for gemstones that feel less corporate and more personal. That emotional connection matters more than many people realize. The strongest luxury assets are rarely the ones viewed only as investments. They are the ones owners become emotionally attached to, and watermelon tourmaline creates that attachment unusually fast, especially when the colors appear so perfect. They almost look designed by nature on purpose. Yet the next gemstone changed something even more important than collector taste. It changed the market itself. Ranked 8th, Bicolor Sapphire. Not long ago, many gem dealers treated these sapphires as mistakes. Color zoning was considered a problem. Buyers wanted consistency, one clean color, one predictable identity. If a sapphire shifted from golden yellow into deep blue inside the same crystal, cutters often tried to hide it completely. Today, some collectors are paying premiums specifically because that divide exists. That reversal says a great deal about how the luxury gemstone market is changing. Among traditional sapphires, value was historically tied to purity of color. Cashmere blue, royal blue, cornflower blue. The closer a stone moved toward a single idealized appearance, the more desirable it became. But bicolor sapphires introduced something that perfect stones could not offer: individuality. No two zoning patterns form exactly alike. Some crystals contain dramatic oceans of midnight blue crashing into warm amber light. Others reveal delicate transitions resembling storm clouds at sunset. Under magnification, the internal boundaries often look less like mineral growth and more like abstract paintings trapped inside transparent crystal. That uniqueness has become increasingly attractive to modern high-net-worth buyers searching for assets that feel personal rather than standardized. And unlike trend-driven luxury products, fine sapphires already carry centuries of prestige behind them. That combination matters. Collectors are not looking at bicolor sapphires as experimental curiosities anymore. They are viewing them as rare extensions of an already established luxury category. The strongest examples now attract particular attention when left untreated. Natural color zoning without heat enhancement is exceptionally important in the upper collector market, especially for stones sourced from Montana, Sri Lanka, and certain regions of Madagascar. Some gem cutters have adapted in fascinating ways. Instead of trying to erase the zoning, elite lapidaries now orient the cut specifically to showcase it. A carefully angled facet arrangement can cause the two colors to separate dramatically under light, creating movement inside the gemstone as it rotates. That optical behavior has become part of the appeal. The stone never looks static. And in a collector world increasingly saturated with predictable luxury, movement creates attention. Private buyers have also begun gravitating toward bicolor sapphires because the stones balance familiarity with rarity. Unlike obscure minerals unfamiliar to mainstream audiences, sapphire already carries immediate recognition and status. But the bicolor phenomenon transforms that familiar prestige into something visually distinctive and far harder to replace. That balance between legacy and uniqueness is becoming one of the strongest forces in luxury collecting, especially among buyers who already own traditional investment gems and now want something the market cannot easily standardize. Because once collectors begin prioritizing identity over perfection, the definition of rarity starts changing very quickly. Ranked 7th, Ametrine. Deep inside a remote region of Bolivia, a rare geological event created a crystal that still confuses people the first time they see it. Part of the stone forms as amethyst. The rest develops as citrine. Purple suddenly becomes gold inside the same transparent quartz crystal, often divided with startling precision. In exceptional specimens, the transition appears so sharp it resembles deliberate design rather than natural formation. Yet Ametrine is entirely real, and its existence depends on an unusually delicate balance of heat, oxidation, and radiation occurring during crystal growth over immense stretches of geological time. Even slight environmental changes would have prevented the color split from forming at all. That fragile chain of conditions is one reason collectors remain fascinated by high-grade Ametrine, not because it follows traditional luxury rules, but because it breaks them. Most elite gemstones gain prestige through consistency, uniform color, predictable grading, stable appearance across categories. Ametrine does the opposite. Its entire identity depends on contradiction. Warm golden citrine and cool violet amethyst should not comfortably exist together inside one crystal. The visual tension creates something psychologically powerful. The gemstone feels unstable in the best possible way. One half radiates warmth and light, the other carries depth and shadow. That duality gives exceptional Ametrine a very different emotional character from more conventional collector stones. And increasingly, modern luxury buyers are responding to emotional uniqueness as strongly as rarity itself. Some of the finest examples originate from the Anahy mine in Bolivia, a source legendary among gem enthusiasts for producing naturally vivid color separation. Stones with balanced saturation on both sides are particularly prized because many crystals favor one color too heavily, weakening the dramatic contrast collectors want. Cutting also becomes unusually important. A poorly oriented cut can destroy the effect entirely. But when handled by skilled lapidaries, the gemstone transforms into something visually theatrical. As light moves across the facets, the purple and gold zones interact almost like two separate gemstones trapped in motion together. That optical tension photographs extremely well. Another reason Ametrine has quietly expanded beyond traditional gem collecting circles and into luxury design, boutique jewelry houses, and high-end custom commissions. There is also another factor increasing interest: accessibility. Compared to many elite gemstones, large Ametrine crystals can still be acquired at prices far below what their visual impact suggests. That imbalance has attracted experienced collectors who believe the market may eventually reassess the stone's long-term position. Because luxury history repeatedly shows the same pattern. Once collectors begin valuing uniqueness over convention, overlooked categories can rise surprisingly fast. And some gem experts believe Ametrine may still be early in that transformation. Especially as the next gemstone on this list reveals something wealthy collectors often value even more than visual drama: exclusivity through obscurity. Ranked 6th, Andalusite. Certain gemstones announce their value immediately. Andalusite does not. At first glance, many people overlook it entirely. The colors appear restrained, earth-toned, subtle. Nothing about the stone screams for attention inside a jewelry showcase crowded with vivid sapphires, emeralds, or neon tourmalines. Then the gemstone moves. Suddenly, olive green shifts into molten gold. Bronze flashes become deep reddish-brown. In some stones, the internal colors seem to slide across the crystal surface almost like liquid metal reacting to light. That optical behavior is known as pleochroism, and in fine Andalusite, it can become mesmerizing. Unlike gemstones valued for one dominant appearance, Andalusite creates luxury through controlled transformation. The stone never reveals itself all at once. Its personality changes depending on angle, lighting, and movement, which gives exceptional specimens a far more intimate relationship with the viewer. That subtle complexity is precisely why experienced collectors have started paying closer attention to it. Not every luxury asset is designed to impress instantly. Some are built for recognition among people who already understand rarity. Andalusite occupies that category almost perfectly. Historically associated with Spain, where some of the finest early specimens were discovered, the gemstone has long existed on the outer edges of mainstream jewelry culture. Yet within advanced collector circles, high-grade Andalusite developed a quiet reputation for something increasingly valuable in modern luxury: understated exclusivity. The best stones often avoid overly saturated colors entirely. Instead, they display elegant transitions between olive, amber, cognac, forest green, and copper tones, shades more commonly associated with luxury interiors, vintage leather, aged whiskey, and bespoke tailoring than traditional gemstones. That aesthetic matters psychologically. Many wealthy collectors eventually move away from obvious displays of luxury. Bright excess becomes less appealing. Recognition from knowledgeable insiders becomes more important than mass visibility. Andalusite fits that evolution perfectly. It feels private. Even the cutting style reflects that mentality. Skilled lapidaries orient the gemstone carefully to maximize directional color shifts rather than simple brilliance. The result is a gem that rewards prolonged viewing instead of immediate spectacle. Some stones almost appear cinematic under warm lighting, especially in larger custom cuts where the internal color movement becomes more dramatic. And because fine Andalusite remains unfamiliar to much of the mainstream luxury market, supply competition still operates differently compared to heavily commercialized gems. Exceptional collector-grade material can disappear quietly through private dealers before most buyers ever know it existed. That hidden market behavior has become increasingly attractive to elite collectors searching for rarity without mainstream saturation, especially in a world where social media has made many luxury categories feel overexposed. Andalusite offers the opposite experience, a gemstone that does not demand attention from everyone, only from the people capable of recognizing what they are looking at. But the next stone transformed quiet collector interest into something far more dangerous for the market: fear of losing access entirely. Ranked 5th, Bicolor Tanzanite. Mining crews in northern Tanzania have spent decades searching for stones with the rich blue-violet saturation that made Tanzanite famous across the luxury world. But every so often, a crystal emerges that breaks the rules completely. Instead of displaying one unified body color, the stone develops dramatic internal zoning: rivers of electric blue fading into violet, flashes of indigo dissolving into smoky lavender, sections of color appearing layered almost like storm clouds trapped beneath the surface. For many years, dealers considered these stones commercially inconvenient. Traditional luxury markets preferred consistency, especially in high-end Tanzanite jewelry, where deep uniform color became the benchmark for prestige. That attitude has started changing. Quietly at first, then much faster. Because the collector market began noticing something important. No two bicolor tanzanites ever looked remotely alike. And scarcity changes, meaning when uniqueness cannot be standardized. Unlike many gemstones sourced across multiple regions worldwide, Tanzanite comes from only one small mining area near Mount Kilimanjaro. That geological limitation already created enormous long-term pressure around supply. But when rare zoning patterns appear inside top-quality crystals, the rarity intensifies dramatically. The market is no longer evaluating only color. It is evaluating unrepeatable visual identity. That distinction matters more than ever in modern luxury collecting. Exceptional bicolor tanzanites often reveal shifting gradients that seem almost atmospheric rather than geological. Under directional light, the stone can move between velvety royal blue, deep violet, flashes of burgundy, and cold midnight tones depending on orientation. In larger collector cuts, the internal transitions become so dimensional that the gemstone appears to contain layers of moving color suspended inside it. That depth creates emotional impact far beyond ordinary brilliance. Some collectors describe fine tanzanite as cinematic rather than decorative. And in elite luxury categories, emotional atmosphere can become just as valuable as technical rarity. Another factor is driving interest even higher. Future uncertainty. The Tanzanite mining region is finite. Industry discussions about long-term depletion have circulated for years, and whether those projections arrive sooner or later, wealthy collectors understand the underlying reality. Supply will never expand beyond this single geographic source. That creates a very different psychological environment from gemstones, with broader global production. Buyers are not simply competing for beauty, they are competing against time. As a result, unusual stones, once dismissed as imperfect, are being re-examined through a completely different lens. Distinct zoning, dramatic color transitions, and unconventional internal patterns now offer something increasingly difficult to find in luxury markets dominated by mass repetition, permanent individuality. Especially in an era where many affluent buyers already own flawless traditional gems and are now searching for pieces that feel impossible to replace. And that search for irreplaceability becomes even more intense when the gemstone itself begins resembling something closer to modern art than traditional jewelry, which is exactly what happened with the next sapphire on this list. Ranked fourth, Parti Sapphire. Luxury jewelry was once built around predictability. Matching diamonds, balanced symmetry, controlled perfection. Parti sapphires disrupted that entire philosophy. Inside a single stone, intense blue collides with green. Golden flashes emerge beside deep forest tones. Some crystals contain sharp divisions between colors, while others dissolve into gradients so complex they resemble brush strokes painted across glass. No standardized formula exists. That unpredictability became the appeal. Originally sourced most famously from Australia, Parti sapphires spent years misunderstood by traditional markets that favored pure, uniform color. Dealers often viewed mixed-color sapphires as commercial compromises rather than premium material. Then, designer jewelry changed. A new generation of collectors began moving away from conventional luxury aesthetics and toward pieces that felt singular. Gemstones with patterns impossible to duplicate, even intentionally. Parti sapphires entered that moment perfectly. Unlike mass-produced luxury items designed for broad appeal, these stones create the opposite experience. Every crystal carries its own visual identity. Some resemble aerial landscapes. Others look like oceans colliding with sunlight. Certain stones reveal angular divisions that feel almost architectural under precision cutting. That visual individuality transformed Parti sapphires into favorites among bespoke jewelry houses and high-end private designers. especially because sapphire already carries established prestige. The gemstone does not need to prove its legitimacy to the luxury market. Its history is centuries old. Royal associations, durability, rarity, and collector recognition already exist. Parti sapphires simply take that familiar status and fracture it into something far more personal, and increasingly, wealthy buyers are willing to pay premiums for personal rarity instead of traditional perfection. Some collectors even reject stones that appear too uniform now, viewing them as emotionally interchangeable. Parti sapphires avoid that problem entirely. The zoning patterns become signatures. Once a collector owns a particularly exceptional example, finding another stone with the same appearance becomes nearly impossible. That irreplaceability changes behavior. The strongest Parti sapphires often disappear quickly into private collections rather than re-entering the public market. Designers sometimes build entire custom pieces around a single unusual crystal because replacing it later may not be realistic. Lighting also plays a major role in their fascination. Under controlled illumination, fine Parti sapphires can reveal extraordinary depth and movement between color zones. Green flashes emerge from blue shadows. Gold appears unexpectedly along facet edges. As the gemstone rotates, different sections dominate moment by moment, giving the stone a constantly evolving visual structure. That dynamic appearance photographs exceptionally well. One reason Parti sapphires have quietly expanded across luxury social circles, boutique auctions, and collector-driven jewelry commissions. But beneath all of that visual beauty sits a much larger shift happening inside the gemstone world itself. Collectors are no longer asking, "Is this perfect?" They are asking, "Will anything else ever look like this again?" And for some of the wealthiest buyers in the market, that question has become incredibly expensive, especially when the next gemstone creates warmth and visual seduction unlike almost anything else in high-end collecting. Ranked third, Bicolor Topaz. Few gemstones create warmth the way fine topaz does. Not brightness, not sparkle, warmth. The sensation is difficult to explain until a truly exceptional bicolor specimen appears under controlled light. Amber tones begin glowing from inside the crystal. Champagne gold fades into burnt orange. Honey-colored transparency deepens toward copper and sunset red along the edges, creating a visual effect that feels less like mineral color and more like frozen light suspended inside stone. That atmosphere is exactly why elite collectors have started paying attention to rare bicolor topaz in a very different way. Because luxury is not driven only by rarity, it is driven by emotional response. And fine bicolor topaz creates one of the strongest emotional reactions in the entire gemstone world when the color transitions remain natural, untreated, and perfectly balanced. For years, topaz struggled with perception problems in high-end collecting. Commercial blue topaz flooded the jewelry market so aggressively that many buyers stopped associating the mineral with exclusivity at all. But collector-grade bicolor specimens exist in an entirely different category, especially stones displaying natural transitions between imperial orange, golden peach, cognac, and warm champagne tones. These stones are extraordinarily difficult to cut correctly. Unlike gems valued primarily for brilliance, bicolor topaz depends heavily on orientation. A slight mistake during cutting can flatten the entire optical effect. But when handled by master lapidaries, the gemstone develops extraordinary dimensionality. The internal color gradients begin unfolding gradually as the stone moves, almost like changing light during sunset. That cinematic quality has made fine bicolor topaz increasingly desirable among collectors who prioritize atmosphere over conventional prestige. And atmosphere matters far more in luxury markets than most people realize. High-end buyers are often responding subconsciously to how an object makes a space feel. Warm gemstones create intimacy. They soften environments dominated by metal, glass, and architectural minimalism. Large bicolor topaz pieces displayed under low lighting can transform from decorative objects into focal points for entire interiors. That shift from jewelry to environmental luxury is becoming increasingly important. Some private collectors are now acquiring oversized custom-cut topaz specifically for display installations rather than wearable settings. In certain luxury residences, a single gemstone becomes part of the room's identity, illuminated carefully like sculpture or fine art. And, unlike heavily commercialized luxury categories, exceptional bicolor topaz still retains an element of discovery. The finest untreated stones circulate quietly through specialized dealers and collector networks rather than dominating mainstream auctions or mass-market branding campaigns. That hidden exclusivity increases desirability even further among buyers exhausted by overly visible luxury trends. Because once rarity becomes too public, part of its psychological power disappears. True high-end collecting has always depended on something more subtle, the feeling of possessing beauty most people will never encounter in person. And the next gemstone on this list takes that feeling into territory so strange. Even experienced collectors sometimes question what they are seeing under the light. Ranked second, Bicolor Spinel. Long before Spinel earned respect as a standalone luxury gemstone, many of its finest crystals spent centuries being mistaken for something else. Rubies, sapphires, even royal crown jewels were misidentified because exceptional Spinel possessed the same vivid intensity collectors desperately wanted from more famous stones. That history alone already gave Spinel an unusual place in the gemstone world. But when rare bicolor formations began attracting attention from elite collectors, the market started viewing the stone very differently. Because unlike traditional Spinel, these crystals do not present one stable identity. They shift between worlds. Certain specimens move from smoky lavender into electric pink. Others transition from silver gray into deep crimson or violet blue. In some rare stones, the divide appears soft and atmospheric. In others, the zoning cuts sharply across the crystal, like fractured light, frozen inside glass. And that visual instability has become increasingly desirable among wealthy collectors searching for gemstones that feel emotionally unpredictable. Not chaotic, alive. Bicolor Spinel carries a very different energy from many traditional luxury stones. Diamonds communicate control. Emeralds project legacy. Sapphires suggest authority. But fine Spinel feels modern. There is something unusually cinematic about the way the colors interact under light, especially in untreated stones with strong saturation and clean transparency. As the gemstone rotates, the internal shifts create changing moods inside the crystal itself. Cold one moment, warm the next. That emotional movement matters more than ever in today's collector market. Because many high-net-worth buyers are no longer building collections around hierarchy alone. They are building around experience, around emotional memory, around pieces capable of creating immediate fascination without explanation. Bicolor Spinel excels in that environment precisely because it still feels slightly undiscovered to much of the mainstream luxury world. And sophisticated collectors often prefer entering markets before broader recognition arrives. Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, and Tanzania have all produced notable Spinel material, but exceptional bicolor specimens remain extraordinarily difficult to source with balanced transitions, vivid color separation, and fine clarity existing together naturally. When those qualities align inside one crystal, the gemstone begins moving out of conventional jewelry territory and into collector-grade rarity. Some custom designers have already adapted to this shift. Rather than forcing Spinel into traditional luxury settings, they increasingly build minimalist pieces around the stone itself, allowing the zoning and color transitions to dominate visually. The gemstone becomes the centerpiece not because of size, but because its appearance cannot be replicated convincingly. That distinction is becoming extremely important. The modern luxury market is saturated with polished perfection, identical diamonds, repeated aesthetics, predictable prestige. Bicolor Spinel offers something far more difficult to mass-produce: individual emotional identity. And among elite collectors quietly reshaping the gemstone market, that may be becoming the most valuable rarity of all. In first place, Bicolor Tourmaline. Somewhere along the line, the luxury market stopped rewarding perfection alone. The shift happened quietly. Auction catalogs became less predictable. Private collectors began competing for stones with unusual inclusions, asymmetric color patterns, and visual identities impossible to duplicate. High jewelry designers moved away from standardized symmetry and toward gemstones that felt emotionally singular. And almost no gemstone benefited from that transformation more dramatically than Bicolor Tourmaline. Unlike traditional collector stones defined by one dominant color, fine Bicolor Tourmaline behaves like compressed visual chaos controlled by nature itself. Neon blue can dissolve into emerald green. Electric pink fractures into copper and gold. Certain crystals contain transitions so vivid they appear illuminated internally, especially under precision cutting and directional light. The finest examples do not look static. They feel active. That sensation has become extraordinarily important in modern luxury psychology. Today's high net worth collectors increasingly want objects that create immediate emotional reaction, not only from themselves, but from everyone who encounters the piece. Recognition matters, memorability matters, distinct identity matters. Bicolor Tourmaline delivers all three at once. And unlike gemstones whose prestige depends heavily on branding history, Tourmaline creates impact visually before any explanation becomes necessary. A remarkable specimen can stop conversations instantly because the human eye struggles to process how naturally occurring color transitions could become so intense inside a single crystal. That reaction is precisely what elite collectors are paying for. Not simply rarity, but interruption. The ability of an object to disrupt attention inside environments already saturated with expensive things. Thus, this is one reason extraordinary tourmalines have become increasingly visible inside ultra-custom jewelry commissions, private gemstone vaults, and investment-driven collector circles searching for alternatives to more traditional luxury categories. Some Paraiba-influenced bicolor combinations, especially stones displaying neon blue-green transitions beside vivid secondary tones, have generated intense demand due to their near-electric appearance under light. And unlike many investment assets built around numerical grading systems, Bicolor Tourmaline often escapes rigid standardization entirely. One stone may be valued for violent color contrast, another for soft atmospheric blending, another for internal structures resembling abstract paintings or cosmic imagery. That freedom changes collector behavior. Buyers stop chasing identical benchmarks and start chasing emotional response instead, which means the gemstone market begins behaving less like commodity trading and more like the art world. That evolution may become one of the most important long-term shifts happening in luxury collecting right now, because once individuality overtakes perfection as the highest form of rarity, entirely new categories of gemstones can rise in value much faster than traditional markets expect. And Bicolor Tourmaline sits directly at the center of that change, not because it follows old luxury rules better than other stones, but because it represents what the next generation of elite collecting is becoming. A market driven less by flawless repetition and far more by the pursuit of things that should not exist twice. For years, luxury gemstones were valued for one thing: perfection. But the market is changing. Wealthy collectors are now chasing gemstones with split identities, impossible color transitions, and patterns that look almost unnatural under light, not because they are flawless, because they are unforgettable. A crystal divided between emerald green and electric pink will always attract more attention than another predictable stone locked inside a vault. And that shift is quietly redefining modern gemstone collecting. Because in today's luxury market, rarity alone is no longer enough. Collectors want something far more dangerous, a gemstone that nobody else could ever mistake for their own.